Adana was just a little girl when her whole world changed. She lived in Makurdi, Nigeria, with her father after her mother passed away. Her mother's death left a hole in her heart that nothing could fill. She would sit by the window sometimes, remembering the warmth of her mother's voice, the gentle touch of her hands, and the way she always made her feel safe. But those days were gone, and the house never felt the same again. Her father, Obinna, didn't wait long before remarrying. He brought home a new wife, Ngozi. At first, Adana wanted to believe this woman might be a mother to her, someone who could give her the love she missed. Ngozi was beautiful, polite, and always smiling whenever people were around. In front of neighbors and relatives, she acted kind, as if she cared about Adana. But behind closed doors, her smile disappeared, and so did the kindness. Adana began to feel like an outsider in her own home. The house that once carried her mother's laughter now carried whispers, cold stares, and the weight of silence. Her father seemed happy with his new wife, but he never noticed the way Adana's eyes dimmed or how quiet she had become. Whenever she tried to speak, Ngozi's sharp eyes silenced her. At night, lying on her small bed, Adana often cried quietly so no one could hear. She felt invisible, unwanted, and lonely. Deep inside, she wondered if life would always be this way. At the beginning, life with Ngozi seemed almost normal. She smiled at Adana, spoke softly, and even called her my daughter in front of people. For a short while, Adana thought maybe this woman would truly love her. But slowly, the mask began to slip, and the kindness turned into something darker. It started with little things that didn't look like much at first. During meals, Ngozi always made sure her own children had the biggest pieces of meat, the largest scoops of rice, while Adana's plate looked almost empty. Sometimes she would get only bones in her soup, and if she complained, Ngozi would snap, "Be grateful for what you have." Adana's stomach often growled at night, but she stayed silent, too scared to say more. Then came the endless chores. From sunrise until late in the evening, Adana was the one sweeping the compound, washing clothes, scrubbing floors, and fetching water. Meanwhile, Ngozi's children played freely, laughing and running around while Adana's hands cracked from soap and water. If she ever slowed down, Ngozi's voice would cut through the air like a whip. "Lazy girl! Do you want to bring shame to this house?" The worst part was her father, Obinna. He seemed blind to it all. Whenever he was home, Ngozi changed back into her sweet role. She served him food with a smile, spoke gently, and even pretended to care for Adana. "She's a little slow with chores," Ngozi would say with a laugh, making Obinna shake his head as if it were true. He never noticed the way Adana's shoulders dropped or how quickly she wiped away her tears. Adana tried to be strong. She told herself, if I just work harder maybe she will like me. But no matter what she did, it was never enough. If the floor was shining, Ngozi would find dust on the window. If the clothes were folded neatly, she would throw them down and shout, "Do it again!" Day after day, Adana's hope grew weaker, replaced by fear and sadness. She felt like she was living in two different worlds, one where outsiders saw a happy family, and another where she was treated like a servant in her own home. At night, her little body ached from carrying buckets of water, and her stomach twisted from hunger. She often hugged herself tightly in bed, whispering into the darkness, "Mama, I wish you were here. I wish someone could see me." But no one saw her pain. Her father was lost in his new marriage, and Ngozi's cruelty grew bolder with every passing day. Adana was only a child, yet she was already learning how harsh and unfair the world could be. And deep inside, a storm of loneliness and silent tears was building, waiting for the moment it would finally break. The day of the family gathering was supposed to be joyful. Relatives from near and far came to Obinna's house in Makurdi. The compound was full of laughter, music, and the smell of food. Adana, dressed in a simple gown, moved quietly among the guests, serving plates and pouring drinks. She wasn't treated like the other children, who played freely and laughed without care. Still, she tried to smile. Somewhere in her heart, she hoped that maybe this day would be different. As the evening went on, people began talking about their children, their grades, their dreams, and their future plans. One uncle asked cheerfully, "Adana, what do you want to become when you grow up?" For a moment, her heart leaped. Finally someone asked her. She looked up shyly, her voice soft but filled with hope. "I want to be a doctor," she said. Her eyes sparkled for the first time in a long while, as if she could already see herself wearing a white coat, helping people, saving lives. But before she could finish, Ngozi's sharp voice cut through the air like a knife. She laughed loudly, drawing everyone's attention. "Doctor. This girl can't even wash dishes properly. How can she dream of being a doctor?" The words hit Adana like a slap. For a second she couldn't breathe. The room erupted with laughter. Some relatives chuckled politely, while others laughed openly, shaking their heads. Adana's cheeks burned. She lowered her eyes, wishing the ground would open and swallow her whole. The dream she had spoken with such courage was now hanging in the air, mocked and broken. Obinna sat quietly, smiling weakly as if it were just a joke. He didn't defend her. He didn't tell them how hard she studied late at night, even after finishing endless chores. He didn't mention her good grades at school. He just let the laughter continue, and that silence hurt more than Ngozi's words. Adana sat frozen, her small hands trembling on her lap. She wanted to run, but her legs felt heavy. Inside her something cracked. She had shared her heart, and it had been crushed in front of everyone. The humiliation was unbearable. Her eyes filled with tears, but she blinked hard, refusing to let them fall. She wouldn't give Ngozi the satisfaction of seeing her cry. Later that night, when the guests had left, Adana hid in a corner of the room, hugging her knees. Her dream of becoming a doctor still burned inside her, but now it was covered in layers of shame and pain. She whispered to herself, maybe one day they will see me." But at that moment, all she felt was small, invisible, and deeply alone, as the echo of laughter still rang in her ears. That night began like any other. Adana had finished her chores and was sitting quietly in a corner, holding a small purse that once belonged to her late mother. Inside it was a little money her mother had secretly saved for her future, money she guarded like treasure. It wasn't much, but to Adana it meant hope, something that connected her to the love of the woman she had lost. Ngozi noticed the purse and demanded, "Give me that money." Her voice was sharp, her eyes burning with greed. Adana clutched the purse tightly against her chest, her small body shaking. "It's Mama's," she whispered. "She left it for me." Ngozi's face twisted with anger. "Are you disobeying me? You dare to keep secrets in my house." Before Adana could move, Ngozi's rough hands grabbed her arm. She dragged her across the hallway, ignoring her cries, and pushed her into a small, dusty room. The walls were bare, the floor cold. With a loud bang, Ngozi locked the door and shouted, "Stay there until you learn obedience." Adana ran to the door, pounding on it with her fists. Please let me out. I'm sorry." Her voice cracked with desperation, but there was no answer, only silence, followed by the sound of footsteps fading away. The night felt endless. Hungry and weak, Adana sank to the floor. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she hugged herself tightly. She thought of her mother's gentle voice, her smile, the way she used to say, "Adana, you are my strong girl." But in that dark room she didn't feel strong. She felt trapped, abandoned, and invisible. Her stomach growled painfully. She hadn't eaten since afternoon, and now the emptiness inside her body matched the emptiness in her heart. She crawled toward the small window, only to find it barred. Moonlight slipped through the cracks, casting faint shadows on her tear-stained face. She pressed her forehead against the cold bars and whispered into the night, "Mama, help me. Please don't leave me alone." Hours passed slowly. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside made her flinch. She imagined being left in that room forever, forgotten. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her throat dry from begging. But no one came. No one cared. When dawn began to break, Adana was still awake, her body trembling from the cold floor. She stared at the window again, watching the first light of morning sneak through. In that silence, a thought began to form inside her broken heart. If they want to lock me in darkness, I must find my own way to the light. Though weak and hopeless, a small spark of courage flickered within her. She didn't know how, but she knew this night would not be the end of her story. It would only be the beginning of her fight to be free. The night had been long and cruel. Adana had cried until her throat burned, but no one came to open the door. By dawn, her eyes were swollen, her body weak, and her spirit almost broken. She sat on the cold floor, staring at the faint light creeping through the small barred window. For a moment, she thought she might never leave that room. Then her eyes caught something she hadn't noticed before, a loose wooden plank just beneath the window frame. Her heart began to race. She crawled closer, her thin fingers trembling as she touched the edge. With all the little strength she had left, she began to push and pull. The wood groaned, splinters digging into her skin, but she didn't stop. Her hands bled, yet desperation gave her power. Finally, with one last push, the plank gave way, leaving a small gap. It wasn't much, but Adana was small and thin. She pressed her body against the opening, squeezing through. The rough wood scratched her arms and tore her dress, but she didn't care. Her only thought was freedom. The moment she slipped through, she fell onto the damp earth outside. Her knees scraped against the ground, blood oozing from tiny cuts. For a second she lay there, breathing hard, the morning air filling her lungs. Then fear pushed her up. She couldn't stay near the house. If Ngozi found her, she would be locked away again, maybe forever. Barefoot and trembling, Adana began to run. The streets of Makurdi were waking up, vendors setting up their stalls, children chasing each other, the sound of bicycles ringing in the distance. But Adana's world was only her pounding heart and the burning pain in her feet as they hit the rough ground. Sharp stones cut her soles, but she kept going, her tears mixing with sweat on her face. People turned to look as she ran past, her dress torn, her face streaked with tears. Some whispered, others stared, but no one stopped her. To them, she was just another child on the streets. To her, it was a race for survival. Her chest ached, every breath heavy, but she refused to slow down. The images of Ngozi's cruel face and the locked door burned in her mind, chasing her like shadows. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to get far away. Finally, her body gave out near a small church. Her legs buckled, and she collapsed on the steps, her tiny frame shaking. She hugged herself tightly, sobbing as the morning sun rose higher. For the first time, she was out of that prison-like house. But freedom came with fear. She was alone in the wide world, with no mother, no father to protect her. Only her tears and her will to survive kept her breathing. And yet, in that moment of pain and exhaustion, a tiny voice inside her whispered, "You escaped. You found the light." The sun was already high when Adana lay weak on the church steps, her body trembling from exhaustion. Her lips were dry, her feet raw from running barefoot, and her torn dress clung to her thin frame. She wanted to cry louder, to call for her mother, but no sound came out. She just curled up, hoping the pain would fade. That was when a shadow fell over her. A gentle voice broke through the silence. "My child, what happened to you?" Adana blinked through her swollen eyes and saw a woman standing above her. She was not young, her face lined with years, but her eyes were soft, filled with kindness. Her name was Mama Ifeoma, a widowed seamstress who lived nearby. Mama Ifeoma knelt down, touching Adana's shoulder carefully, as if afraid the girl might break. "Come with me, my dear. You are safe now." Her words carried warmth, like sunlight after a storm. Adana tried to stand, but her legs were too weak. Mama Ifeoma didn't hesitate. She lifted the child gently, carrying her as though she were her own daughter. Together, they walked to a small house near the church, where the smell of fabric, thread, and freshly cooked soup filled the air. Inside, Mama Ifeoma gave Adana water first. The girl drank greedily, drops spilling down her chin. Then came a bowl of food, soft, warm, and comforting. Adana ate slowly, her body shaking with each spoonful, as if she feared it might be taken away. Mama Ifeoma watched silently, her eyes moist with pity, until the girl finally put the bowl down and whispered, "Thank you." That night, after a bath and clean clothes, Adana sat quietly on a small bed in the corner of the seamstress's home. Mama Ifeoma sat beside her and asked softly, "Now tell me, child, what happened to you?" At first, Adana hesitated. The memories were heavy, the wounds still fresh. But something about Mama Ifeoma's gentle voice and patient eyes made her feel safe. Slowly she began to speak, about her mother's death, her father's quick marriage, Ngozi's cruelty, the locked room, and her desperate escape through the window. Her voice broke often, tears slipping down her cheeks. But Mama Ifeoma listened to every word without interrupting. When Adana finished, the older woman pulled her close, wrapping her in a firm embrace. "My child, you will never go back there," Mama Ifeoma said firmly. "No one will lock you away again. As long as I live, you are safe here." For the first time in months, Adana felt a strange warmth inside her chest. It wasn't just food in her stomach or a roof over her head. It was hope. She lay down that night under Mama Ifeoma's roof, whispering a quiet prayer of thanks. For the first time since her mother died, she closed her eyes and slept peacefully, knowing someone cared enough to protect her. Life with Mama Ifeoma was nothing like the life Adana had left behind. The small house was modest, with walls lined with fabrics, threads, and sewing machines. But to Adana it felt like a palace. There was kindness in every corner, safety in every word Mama Ifeoma spoke, and most importantly, love in every action. Each morning, Adana woke up to the smell of warm food and the sound of sewing machines humming in the little tailoring shop. She quickly became Mama Ifeoma's helper, sweeping the shop, arranging fabrics, threading needles, and even learning small stitching techniques. Unlike the endless chores she had been forced to do at Ngozi's house, here work felt different. It wasn't punishment. It was learning. It was belonging. But Mama Ifeoma didn't just keep her in the shop. She made sure Adana went to school. The first day, Adana walked into class with second-hand shoes and books donated by the church. Her head held low, afraid people would laugh at her. But soon the classroom became her safe space. She listened carefully, wrote down every word the teacher spoke, and spent nights bent over her books, determined to prove that her dreams were still alive. Her pain became her fuel. While other children studied casually, Adana studied like her life depended on it. And in many ways it did. She wasn't just reading words on a page. She was building her escape, her future. Her teachers quickly noticed her brilliance. Even when she was quiet, her answers were sharp. Even when she was shy, her test papers spoke louder than she ever could. "This girl has a bright mind," one teacher said to another. Soon they began to encourage her, offering extra notes and guidance. At the tailoring shop, Mama Ifeoma proudly told customers, "My Adana wants to be a doctor one day." Each time she said it, Adana's heart swelled. She remembered the night her stepmother had mocked her in front of relatives, and the echo of laughter that had once crushed her spirit. But now, instead of shame, she carried determination. Days turned into months, and months into years. Adana's hard work paid off. She sat for an important examination, and when the results were announced, her name was at the top. She had not only passed but excelled. Word spread quickly, and soon came the biggest blessing of all, a scholarship to study science in Abuja. When she received the letter, her hands shook as she held it. Tears blurred her vision, but this time they weren't from pain, they were from joy. She ran into Mama Ifeoma's arms, crying, "I did it! Mama, I did it!" Mama Ifeoma hugged her tightly, her own tears falling. "You turned your tears into strength, my child. This is just the beginning." In that moment, Adana knew she was no longer the broken girl who had once been locked in a dark room. She was rising step by step, building herself again with courage, love, and unshakable hope. Years had passed, and the little girl who once cried alone in a locked room was no longer the same. Adana had grown into a confident young woman, her hard work shining brighter than every scar left behind. She had studied with determination, winning awards and scholarships, and now she was returning to Makurdi for a grand school award ceremony. The town buzzed with excitement. Banners with her name and picture were displayed outside the event hall. Adana Obinna, Award for Excellence in Science. People gathered to celebrate the girl who had risen so high despite her struggles. Among the crowd, hidden at first, stood Ngozi. Life had not been kind to her. Her marriage to Obinna had collapsed years ago, leaving her bitter and struggling. She looked older, her once proud face marked with worry lines. She hadn't expected to see Adana's name everywhere, and when she did, her chest tightened with a mixture of shame and disbelief. Inside the hall, the ceremony began. Adana walked across the stage gracefully, wearing a simple but elegant dress. Her smile lit up the room as she accepted her award from local leaders. The audience clapped loudly, standing to honor her achievements. Cameras flashed, children whispered her name in admiration, and teachers who had guided her beamed with pride. But Ngozi could only stare. Her mind replayed the past, the cruel words, the small food portions, the endless chores, the locked room. She remembered laughing when Adana had once said she wanted to be a doctor. And now here was that same girl, standing tall on stage, celebrated by everyone. After the ceremony ended, people rushed to congratulate Adana, shaking her hand, hugging her, telling her how proud they were. She greeted them warmly, her voice full of gratitude. Then, out of the corner of her eye, she saw a familiar figure. Her heart skipped. It was Ngozi. The older woman stood frozen, tears welling in her eyes. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then, with trembling steps, Ngozi walked closer. Her voice cracked as she whispered, "Adana, my child." Adana's chest tightened. Memories of pain and loneliness came rushing back. The hunger, the humiliation, the nights of crying. For a moment, anger threatened to rise. But then she steadied herself. She was no longer that broken girl. She had found her light. Ngozi's tears fell as she spoke. "Forgive me. I was blinded by envy. I didn't see your worth. Look at you now. You've become everything I once tried to destroy." The hall grew quiet as people noticed the scene. Adana looked at the woman who had once been her greatest tormentor. With a calm but steady voice she replied, "You locked me in darkness, but that darkness pushed me to find my own light." Ngozi bowed her head, crying silently. Adana turned away, walking toward her future with dignity, leaving the past behind, but never forgetting the strength it had given her. After the ceremony ended, people filled the hall with joy and chatter, but Adana's eyes were drawn to one figure moving slowly toward her. It was Ngozi. The woman who had once starved her, mocked her, and locked her in a dark room now looked nothing like the powerful stepmother she used to be. Her clothes were plain, her shoulders bent, and her eyes swollen with tears. She stopped in front of Adana, her lips trembling as words struggled to come out. Finally, in a broken voice, she whispered, "Forgive me, child. I was blinded by envy." Her tears rolled freely down her cheeks, her pride gone, her strength crushed. She reached out her hand as if to touch Adana, but then pulled it back, afraid she no longer had the right. Adana stood still, her award clutched in her hands. Her heart was heavy, torn between the painful memories of the past and the reality of the present. Images flashed in her mind, the small food portions, the laughter at the family gathering, the locked door, the night she cried until her eyes swelled. Each memory cut deep, but so did the sight of the broken woman standing before her. The crowd around them fell silent, watching closely. Some whispered, some waited. They all knew the story, how Ngozi had once treated Adana and how Adana had risen despite it. Now they wanted to hear what she would say. Taking a deep breath, Adana lifted her chin and spoke softly but firmly. "You locked me in darkness, but that darkness pushed me to find my own light." Her voice did not shake. It carried the weight of her pain but also the strength of her survival. Ngozi covered her face, sobbing harder. "I was wrong. I was cruel. See it now. And I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I beg for it." Her body shook as she cried, the hall echoing with her broken voice. Adana looked at her stepmother for a long moment. Inside her chest, emotions battled. Anger, sadness, pity, and strength. Part of her wanted to scream, to remind Ngozi of all the nights she suffered. But another part of her understood that carrying bitterness would only chain her to the past. She stepped closer, her voice calm but steady. "Ngozi, I don't hate you. You tried to break me but instead you made me stronger. You wanted me small but you pushed me to rise. I don't carry your cruelty with me anymore. I let it go. I carry only my dreams, and they brought me here." The hall erupted in quiet applause, not loud and wild, but soft and emotional, like a wave of respect. Ngozi's sobs grew louder as she dropped to her knees, But Adana didn't bend down. She simply walked away, her head high, her award shining in her hands. Her heart was heavy, yes, but also free. For the first time, she knew that true victory wasn't just standing tall. It was choosing not to let the past define her anymore. The hall in Abuja was full of young people, their eyes fixed on the stage where Adana now stood. She held the microphone with steady hands, her voice calm but powerful. She wasn't just a girl telling a story. She was living proof that pain could be turned into strength. She looked around at the eager faces before her and said, "Once, I was locked in a small room by someone who wanted to break me. I cried all night, hungry and hopeless. But at dawn, I found a loose plank by the window. I pushed it aside and escaped. That moment taught me something I will never forget. If someone locks you in, don't break. Find the window. Tip. Cry if you must, but let your tears water the seeds of your future." Her words filled the hall like fire, sparking something deep in the hearts of everyone listening. Many nodded, some wiped their eyes, and others clapped before she even finished. Adana smiled faintly, her eyes shining, not with sadness but with victory. "This life will not always be kind," she continued, her voice strong. "People may laugh at your dreams. They may shut doors in your face. But remember, no one can lock your spirit unless you let them. Use the pain. Turn it into power. Turn it into your future." The hall erupted into thunderous applause, the sound echoing through every corner. Adana stepped back, her heart full. She wasn't just the girl who had escaped a locked room anymore. She was the woman who had turned her story into light for others. Across Nigeria, her story spread, not as a tale of suffering, but as a message of triumph and hope.